causal link between gut microbes, the microbes that live in our gut, and various different neurological diseases. This new research that's just published in a journal this year, it's diving deep into looking at different types of neurological diseases and how there's always this link to a disruption in the gut microbiome. So, could the gut microbiome be the cause of neurological diseases? Absolutely. If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha. I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis over 35 years ago. And by the grace of God, I learned early on that the MS that I was dealing with was caused by infections in the body, different types of chronic infections, which we call parasitic infections or a parasitic infestation. And so as I learned over the years how to treat those parasites, I was able to make sure that I was able to stay MS free now for over 35 years. And since then, we've had the amazing privilege to coach thousands of people all over the world. Whether you've just found some of my videos and you've made some changes, some of you have been treating parasites with your practitioners, and I don't even know who you are. I just get emails from you, thanking me, and I just want to thank you for sharing. But some of you have worked intimately with us in the Live Disease Free plan, building a game plan to treat these parasites that are causing neurological diseases. So it's really nice when research is coming together. And I would have to say I'm very sad, I'm disappointed that there is not more research, and that when they're doing studies like this, that they don't carry it further, that they're not diving deeper into which exactly are the microbes that are out of balance and what would happen if we would treat them. Would people be cured? Would people recover from diseases like ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, Huntington's disease, and others? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we know that there is this highway of nerves between our gut and our brain, and there is this microbiota gut-brain axis. And so basically what's happening in the brain is affecting the microbes in our gut, and the microbes in our gut are having a huge impact on the nerves in our brain and in our central nervous system. So there is this two-way communication that's going on all the time. And when we have changes in our gut microbes, that has been shown to be linked with neural or brain inflammation, and it triggers mobility disorders, movement disorders, and also a lot of cognitive impairment. So this study, this review of many, many studies, they used something called metagenomics, and that is a process where they're taking a sample of all of the genetic material of the microbes in humans or in certain humans, and they're able to figure out which microbes are present in those humans. And so they're using this in this review of studies. So this is a study that they're looking at other studies that were done between the years 2018 and 2023. And what they did is they went on to PubMed or Medline. It's a medical database where they could find a bunch of studies, and they did searches. So they would look for things that they would do searches for something like dementia and metagenomics, or Alzheimer's disease and metagenomics, or MS and metagenomics. So they would look through each of those neurological diseases and look for studies that had been done on looking at the genetic material, the genetic makeup of the microbes that live in people that have these diseases. Then they would also do other searches where they would type in the disease, they'd substitute out the metagenomics, and they would substitute in the word either microbiota or gut microbes. So they might do a search for MS and microbiota, MS and gut microbiome. I would really encourage you to do that also. You can do searches like MS and chronic infections, MS and candida, MS and malaria, MS and babesia, MS and parasites. Like, you can just do all of these different types of searches and find relatively current searches. I would use more ones that are more current, but sometimes there's value in finding the older studies also. For example, going back into the older studies, there's over 100 years of research, many studies linking MS with a type of bacteria, a spirochete bacteria, like similar to the Borrelia bacteria that causes Lyme disease. Or there's also 100 years of research studies linking multiple sclerosis to a type of protist, a single cell parasite similar to malaria or babesia. So this type of study that we're looking at today, it has its limitations. It definitely is on the right track. They're looking at changes in the microbiome, but what I find is that we're just not moving fast enough, and it's really frustrating. So looking here, and another thing that I found really disheartening is that they were only looking at bacteria and bacteriophages, fungi, and viruses. They were not considering protists, protozoa. They were not considering worms. And so they could be missing a lot of the microbiome. It's just assumed that in developed countries that we don't have worms, that we can only get bacteria and viruses, but we cannot have worms, and protists are not really an issue either. And nothing could be further from the truth. So that was a limitation of this study, absolutely, for sure. So we know that there's trillions of microbes that live in the human body, and probably, well over 90% of them are living in our digestive tract. And they're supposed to be living in kind of a symbiotic relationship with us where they're benefiting us and we're benefiting them. But there are certain microbes that are opportunists that once we go on antibiotics or other medications and then we eat too many carbs, they get an advantage and they become overpopulated and they can cause problems inside of us. So the composition of the gut microbiota is different at different stages in our life. And also it's different in different genders, male versus female. We have different compositions of microbes that live inside of our bodies. And also we know that like the whole field of the microbes that live in our body, it is such a huge field of research. It's like it's the biggest field of research today, and really understanding how microbes affect us in health and in sickness. We know that microbes can produce different poisons that can cause inflammation and our immune system to really struggle, can cause our immune suppression. But the good microbes can also produce a lot of compounds, or not toxins, but substances that actually help to modulate the immune system. And so some of those would be like secondary bile salts, choline, neuromodulators, bacteriocins, and short-chain fatty acids. So those are just a few different substances that health-promoting microbes will produce that help us. And that's the synergistic or the symbiotic relationship where we need them. They're health-promoting microbes and they need us. We are their home. They live inside of us. They get nutrients from us and they help us. And we know that, for example, if we've taken antibiotics and we don't have enough lactobacillus, which is a type of health-promoting bacteria, then we can have a shortage of these short-chain fatty acids. And when we don't have enough of them, then we can definitely have a more compromised leaky gut, or the integrity of the lining of the digestive tract is compromised, so we end up with leaky gut. So there's many, many other examples of that. That's just one. So the gut microbes can also kind of act or create this secondary immune system. So a lot of different microbes can produce all kinds of natural antibiotics against pathogens, against disease-causing, not just bacteria, but also worms and protists, etc. And so they live inside of our intestinal tract. So they're not just living there making vitamins for us and making things to support our immune system and immune modulation, but they're also helping to keep the bad microbes in check. And on the other hand, the brain can directly, remember this gut-brain axis, the brain can directly impact the microbes in the gut by what it is causing to be secreted in the GI tract. So again, there is this bidirectional, two-directional communication between our gut and our brain, which we're just starting to scratch the surface to understand how complicated or how complex it is. And this really involves neurotransmitters, neuromodulators, neuroimmune pathways, autonomic nervous system. So that's your nervous system outside of your brain. So, your heart, your legs, your arms, everything outside of your central nervous system, and the neuroendocrine system. So this is all of your glands and the nerves and the glands together, working together. So intestinal metabolites, so things that are produced by the microbiome, by the microbes in the gut, and inflammatory factors, they can actually activate immune cells in our central nervous system. And that can lead also to neurodegenerative diseases. So it's a very complex topic, but the nice thing is with this study, what they've done is they've reviewed as best they can the scientific literature for about 5 years, from 2018 to 2023, through a medical database, and they were just looking for studies where they were finding that there's a disruption in the microbiome with specific diseases like Parkinson's disease, ALS, MS, Huntington's disease, and Alzheimer's disease. And so we'll just talk really quickly about some of their findings. And if you guys have any questions, make sure to type your questions in the question box. I will come to those in a minute. I'm just going to make sure I have those up here. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so let's first talk about Parkinson's. There's lots of information. If you just do a Google search, maybe you're dealing with Parkinson's, just do Parkinson's and dysbiosis, do searches. And you don't have to worry about reading all the science. Like if you find an article that's talking about Parkinson's and microbiota, gut microbiota, dysbiosis. Oh, and I should mention too, if you're new, because I've been talking about dysbiosis for many years, but dysbiosis means you're out of balance. You have too many disease-causing microbes and not enough health-promoting microbes. All right, so dysbiosis means we're just out of balance. That's just another word for it. And so when you go onto these medical databases, you can find studies that are very current where they're actually showing that, yes, when people have Parkinson's disease, they have dysbiosis, and they've had a lot of gut issues for years. And I've shared that with multiple sclerosis also. And so it's kind of like, well, if we've had that for years, then shouldn't we be looking there? And they're like, well, no, let's not look there. Let's just say it's the immune system's fault. And what we can do is we can just say, well, we can just monitor which microbes are out of balance. And we can say, well, usually when you have more advanced disease, you have these type of microbes, or more of these and less of these. And when you're not as sick, you have more of these and less of these. It's like, well, why don't we see if changing that helps us? No, it's your immune system. It's just your immune system's fault. Like, we're so sick of that. Aren't you sick of that? I'm so sick of that. Anyhow, so with Parkinson's disease, what they've shared is that it's thought to be, and I always say that it's thought to be a genetic, like there's genetic factors. What we know is that there are so many things that impact which genes are turned on and turned off, which genes are expressed. So a gene is basically like a blueprint, and your body is going to make a specific protein. And so if it's turned on, then your body's going to make that protein. And if it's turned off, then your body's not going to make that protein. And we know that what we eat and our mood, the microbes that live in our body, there are so many factors that affect gene expression that it's not as simple to say, oh, you have a genetic disorder, because things can change. It's not set in stone. And that is the really awful thing, is that a lot of people are told that and they think, oh, there's no hope for me. And that's not necessarily the case. So it is thought that Parkinson's could be caused by genetic factors, so things that are affecting our genetic expression, but also a wide variety of environmental factors, such as inflammatory bowel disease and infections. So, inflammatory bowel, we know that inflammation is always present in any disease, including inflammatory bowel disease. We know that the immune system is working hard when there's inflammation. That's what it is. The immune system is activated by something. What's the main job for the immune system? To treat infections. So, in Parkinson's disease, they find that very often people have inflammatory, the immune system is really working hard in the bowels, in the intestines, and also they just have infections. So, they have microbes that are out of balance. And that makes sense, right? Because it's dysbiosis, et cetera. Parkinson's patients, they experience constipation before they experience movement problems. Really important. Parkinson's patients experience constipation before they experience movement problems. So the constipation, the inflammation, the dysbiosis came first before the Parkinson's. It's same with MS. MS patients have had gut issues for at least 5 years before they develop multiple sclerosis. And so, sure, as we are out of balance and these microbes are producing more and more poisons, then we're getting sicker and sicker and having more neurological symptoms, etc. Makes perfect sense. So also, changes in the gut microbiome composition have been observed in both the Parkinson's patients, but also in the animal models for Parkinson's. So they find that when somebody has Parkinson's, they have a higher amount of certain bacteria and less amount of other bacteria. And they've noticed these changes in both patients and in the animal models. And like one particular toxin or substance, it's called alpha-syn fibrillin, yeah. And that is found in the gut of aged mice, the animal model of Parkinson's disease. And it's not only resulted in gastrointestinal issues, but it is also caused motor deficits. And in another study that I found, that E. coli, the bacteria E. coli, they can actually promote the alpha-syn pathway, pathology, in the gut and in the brain. So bacteria can actually be involved in the production of this toxin in the brain and also in the gut. So, and there are hundreds and hundreds of bacteria. There's so many different types of microbes that can get out of balance, and I don't think it's that hard, but we're just not really, like this study again is just kind of looking at this information, but what are they doing with it? So if they find out that there's certain, like what if you treat those bacteria? Do people start to feel a lot better? Or let's start looking at other microbes. Could there be protists? Could there be worms, etc.? In general, significant data highlights the association between inflammatory bowel disease and Parkinson's disease, which shows patients' gastrointestinal symptoms could be really important to monitor. Or how about to correct, right? How about to correct their gut microbiome? Then there is Alzheimer's disease, and they looked at research they could find about the metagenomic information. They could find studies where they looked at the types of microbes that live in people with Alzheimer's, so the gut microbiome. And so they talk there about studies showing that there's mounting evidence suggesting that the gut microbiome alterations or dysbiosis contribute to this alpha-beta, like deposits of this alpha-beta protein. So compared to healthy controls. So again, the gut microbiome alterations or dysbiosis contributes to what they see in Alzheimer's patients. Recently, researchers believe that gut dysbiosis, neuroinflammation, impaired autophagy, which is your body is trying to recycle dead or damaged cells, and also proteinopathy, which is basically when proteins are misfolded. They're not folded properly, so they're not going to have the proper function. And so they feel that that's a vicious cycle in in Alzheimer's patients. But again, sometimes it's the substances that these microbes produce that can cause the different genes to be expressed, can cause mutations with genes, can cause the number one, the body not being able to clean up the damaged cells, or even to have proteins misfolding. Your body normally, generally does not do these things without something interfering with it. So it's not always just the infection, but it's sometimes the poisons that the infection produces. So I think I skipped over this, but for example, there's one toxin that a bacteria that can produce, and that toxin can cause cardiovascular disease. So a toxin produced in your gut by a certain bacteria can cause cardiovascular problems. And they were talking about that. I'll see if I can just go back to that up here earlier. I can't remember where I saw it, but maybe it'll come back to me here. Can't remember where I put it, but oh, here we go. So one example is trimethylamine N oxide. So trimethylamine N oxide, which is a substance that's produced by specific gut bacteria that promote the development of cardiovascular disease. So who would have thought, right? You've got a bacteria in your gut, it's becoming too populated, and then it's producing this toxin, and the toxin is getting into your blood, and it's causing cardiovascular disease. And there could be many, many other different types of toxins. All right, so then I shared that first, the intestinal dysbiosis, it disrupts the integrity of the intestinal barrier. We end up with leaky gut. And then the pathogenic bacteria, and their metabolites, their toxins, they move into the circulation, and they move through the vagus nerve and the enteric nerves, and the neuroinflammation triggers the transport of neurotoxic misfolded proteins, which leads to neural death. This is all still in Alzheimer's. In addition, intestinal and neural cell autophagy, so that's like when the body is cleaning up the dead cells, it further exacerbates the leaky gut. So the role of the gastrointestinal dysfunction is being increasingly discussed in the context of the disease process of Alzheimer's. So in all the research they looked at, they found that the gastrointestinal dysfunction is really becoming discussed a lot more when they're talking about like the disease process of Alzheimer's. ALS, so this is in the animal models of ALS, has been found to exhibit changes in the gut microbiome when compared to healthy mice. Previous work has shown that the microbial derived metabolites are associated with the expression of mitochondrial genes. So what they're saying is that a lot of times is that the metabolites that these microbes produce, these parasites, any microbe that lives in your body and causes you harm is a parasite. A bacteria can cause you harm, fungus, protists, or worms. And so various metabolites or poisons produced by different microbes, they can really impact our mitochondria, which produce energy, little energy factories. So that's the mitochondrial dysfunction. But the neat thing is that I don't think it always is permanent. Like that's what we're seeing. A lot of people are recovering, but we have to treat the parasites effectively enough, and that's sometimes a bit of a challenge. And the genetic cause of ALS causes mitochondrial dysfunction and triggers neural death. So again, the neurological cause of ALS, the genetic cause of ALS. When they say genetic, this is gene expression again. And so just whenever you're hearing that, just think, well, we don't know. Like if that is, it's not in it's for myself. Like if I was diagnosed with MS and this was a hereditary genetic disease, then I should have MS and there should be nothing I can do about it. And there's so many people that have recovered from even ALS. There's people that even in my program that are doing incredibly well. Have we mastered which exact infections are causing it? No, but when they're making all the changes and they're treating, they're having life-changing improvements. And that includes all chronic diseases because they're all stemming from infections. So think of it more like, yes, maybe some of these microbes, the poisons they're producing, are changing the gene expression. And maybe so there could be some changes in physiology that could be also causing some of your symptoms. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's permanent. It just means that, as you treat the parasites and as you support the body is a miracle. It knows how to operate and it can go back to working the way that it should. And it does more often than we realize. So the cells, and so they were just saying that the genetic cause of ALS causes, so like when those genes the expression is altered, there's mitochondrial dysfunction, there's neural death, cells are not able to get rid of the damaged proteins, and this also hinders neurotransmission. So there's like this cascade of reactions of, what happens when you have these infections and the poisons that they produce. So with MS, let's talk about MS for a minute. MS can occur in adults or children. They find that there's different microbes that in children versus adults that have MS. They have done recent studies, the metagenomic studies, looking at the relationship between gut ecology and how that's affected by dietary habits and MS. Diet and MS has gone along many, many years, right? I've been on this train for many years, and it was low fat, high fat, no meat, yes meat, on and on. We're not going to talk about that right now. The intestinal composition of pediatric, I said, was different versus adult. The gut microbiome data shows that there's a higher amount of streptococcus. It's more abundant in secondary progressive MS compared to normal controls. One study showed that patients with MS have higher abundance of certain bacteria, which promote T cell proliferation involved in MS. And so your T cells are really important. So if your T cells are proliferating, then maybe they're trying to protect you against that bacteria. So then why aren't they saying, well, maybe we should, just like you treat somebody for pneumonia or for bronchitis, maybe we should be seeing if knocking back those bacteria would help somebody with MS. Or like, well, it promotes T cell proliferation, so then we should really knock back the T cells. We should wipe them out. It's like, it's just like that analogy I shared last week about the one student said, so you've got a lot of crime in your city and there's a lot of police officers all over the place dealing with the crime, so you take the police officers out, or maybe you help the police officers deal with the crime. No, we don't do it that way because it's a lot more profitable to take out our T cells. Immunosuppressive. And so then there's also, so it's not just that there's higher amounts of certain bacteria and certain microbes in MS that they're finding. And again, they're only looking at bacteria and viruses, but they're also, and I would say more bacteria in all of these studies. And there's also lower abundance in other bacteria. So remember, some of the good health promoting microbes, they can actually help to produce substances that are more immune modulatory. So as we're recovering, we don't want to just treat the bad. We also want to build back the good. We want to bring back the health promoting microbes that help the lining of our intestines and the blood-brain barrier to be really tight, to have those tight junctions so that we don't have a leaky gut and we don't have a leaky brain. So it's twofold: knocking back the bad, building back the good. So with all the different studies that they looked at with MS, their findings suggest that some microbe strains can be used to determine which disease stage of MS has developed. Great. In addition, those short-chain fatty acids producing bacteria can be used to differentiate the severity of MS. So again, if there's less short-chain fatty acids because there's less of the good lactobacillus, then we have more severity of disease. So they're just looking at the different types of, like we have more of this, we have less of that, we have more of this, and we have less of that. And some of these bacteria that we have more of can cause our immune cells to go after them more. It's like, well, maybe our immune system doesn't think that they should be there, and maybe we should help. Maybe there's just like when you have pneumonia and you have too much of a certain bacteria that you need help sometimes. But no, they're like, no, we'll just monitor and say, okay, well, we'll use it as to measure severity. And I'm like, well, if you can't walk and you're going through a terrible MS flare, or if you've had MS for years and you're just slowly getting worse and you're never getting a break, you obviously have progressive. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. It just, nothing makes sense. And I think, this year, the year of 2024, it's all about going to common sense and starting to be trusting your common sense, trusting your intuition, trusting, when you think there's something wrong, this just doesn't make sense. Why are we doing it this way? That you have to trust your intuition. You have to trust that you're right, because it's absolutely insane what we have been doing all these years. Like, again, I was diagnosed 35 years ago and nothing has really changed. So I shared with you this study, and they've just pulled it. This is the best we have for the start of the new year. There was another study that came out with a new MS drug. Again, another immunosuppressive drug. Whoop-de-doo. Like, that's not going to help any of us. We want a cure. We want to recover. We believe that we can recover. There's a lot of people that have recovered. I've lived an amazing life, 35 years MS free. Many of us are doing that now, but we're not following standard of care. We are actually taking a different path. We are treating the cause, and we don't know exactly if it's always the same bacteria, viruses, parasites, not viruses so much, but parasites that are with multiple sclerosis or the other diseases, but there's some that are really common. So looking at Huntington's disease really quickly, again, they think that it's an inherited disease of the nervous system. Currently, efforts are to determine the association between gut dysbiosis and Huntington's disease using metagenomics. It's focused mostly on animal models, animal studies. And again, they're looking for gene mutations where the gene mutation, remember, the DNA is producing, is a blueprint to make proteins. And so then the proteins are not going to be healthy proteins, functional proteins. So they're toxic protein bodies, and that can cause mitochondrial dysfunction and can contribute to the disease process of Huntington's disease. And so that can really affect, especially if we have mitochondrial dysfunction, that can really affect our energy production, our ATP production. So researchers believe that gut microbes play a role in signaling transport along the gut-brain axis by altering plasma metabolite levels. Again, they're talking about the short-chain fatty acids from microbes can stimulate colon cells to produce more ATP, which is then released into the bloodstream. They've also discovered fungal ecosystems in the intestines of Huntington mice, and that's different from the wild-type mice. So they're talking about fungus, like Aspergillus is one, and a couple of other species. And they're also looking at a certain lactobacillus. It's negatively correlated with another microbe. So they're looking in the right direction, but their effort is, to me, it's really pathetic. It's really, really pathetic that we're not much more aggressive. Like, enough already with the studies that looking like which types of bacteria. Then you start to say, okay, well, what happens when we start to change the bacteria, when we start to change? And why are we not looking at worms? Why are we not looking at protists? Why are we only considering bacteria and fungi and viruses? Why? When we live in countries where we're supposed to deworm our pets, the parasites are in our soil, they're on our produce, they're in our animals, they're everywhere. Why do we not also acknowledge or test for different types of other parasites? So we know that gut dysbiosis, like with all of the evidence in this article, it's like screaming at us, like gut dysbiosis is probably the cause of all of these different diseases. All of these diseases, people had gut dysbiosis before they got sick. They had constipation before they got diagnosed, etc. But then we stop there, and then we just go on and we go, oh, well, we could just kind of monitor which bacteria we have, and we know how severe the disease is. It's like, no, let's start looking in the area where what's causing the disease. They finish off the article by going, well, diet and exercise and what else? Probiotics, can really impact our dysbiosis. They didn't even talk about antibiotics. Antibiotics are the number one factor that disrupts the microbiome inside of us, the overuse of antibiotics. And that's probably the biggest factor that's brought us to chronic disease later on in life. And because most of our doctors didn't know how much it disrupts our ecosystem, the health promoting microbes, way more. Like, our diet is important for sure. And probiotics obviously are good to take in this day and age right now, especially with all the assaults on our good microbes. But that's not what made us sick. It is the overuse of antibiotics, maybe the overuse of certain other medications. Our lifestyle can make matters worse, absolutely. So they finish this article by saying, it's probably a good idea to eat more vegetables and take a probiotic supplement, to get enough sleep and to exercise. And that's not going to get you to recover from MS or ALS or Parkinson's or PLS. You got to treat the dysbiosis. The dysbiosis does not go away on its own. The dysbiosis means that you have too many disease-causing microbes, not enough health-promoting microbes. Your immune system is at a disadvantage. It needs support, and you need to get ready to treat, and you need to treat. You need to help restore some balance. You need to knock back the bad, build back the good, and then you become symptom-free. And it's not just bacteria and fungi. I'm going to see if you guys have any questions. Hello, Kevin. How are you doing? Awesome. Hi, Tiffin. Sing to the king. So do you know if mold can cause autism? There are many health things going on in my daughter, and I believe that it's either Lyme or mold or both. It's several things with autism. There can be vaccine injury. That's one thing that can be a problem. And definitely there can be Lyme infections. There can be yeast or mold, some type of fungus. But there's also heavy metals, not just from the vaccines, but from just, we're exposed to different metals. But then also the worms, and this is something that we didn't know, none of us knew. So the work that we do with adults, you can follow us, or you can follow Carrie Rivera. She's amazing. She's a homeopath that her son had autism, and so she's doing the same type of work with children that we're doing with adults. And again, she does everything that we do. It's like, change your diet, support your body, and then start treating. And you always start with the big parasites first. So if your child has worms, which is very, very common, it's really futile to be treating the bacteria and fungi if your child has bigger worms. But there's just certain treatments, and you should work with a practitioner when you are working with drugs, like parasite drugs, to treat a child. They're safe, but there's certain ones you would use and certain ones you wouldn't use, and you'd want to use specific dosages. But I would not overlook that, because you're not going to get the same results. And then there is that oxidizing agent that I talk about that is very safe to use with kids also. So she's helped hundreds and hundreds of kids recover from autism, and I mean recover, where they have a normal ATEX score. They don't need help in school. They're just thriving. But it really you have to do multiple things to recover. Like, it's not just treating Lyme or treating Candida. You're not going to get the results. So I would just go for the whole thing. Watch our masterclass training. Go through, like, we've had parents work with us too. So whatever you feel comfortable, you can look up Carrie Rivera. I love her. She's a sister soulmate, amazing lady, and she's doing a lot of good in the world. So look her up too, Carrie Rivera. And I wish you lots of luck. Hi, Maurice. Good evening. You're in the hospital with COVID again. Hope everything is well. And I'm really sorry that you're dealing with that. I don't know where you're living. If you are living in the United States, there is a website called the FLCCC website, FLCCC website. There you can find providers that will actually help you to use treatments that will help you to recover from COVID. So they will give you whatever medications. I'm not even going to say the names of them here because everything is censored so heavily, but I would trust them. They would use things that would actually help you to get out. So like, for example, there was one priest that was in Canada that he went down to see his mom. His mom passed away. He spent time with her. She passed away. He got COVID down there. I think he got it from her probably. And he was really, really sick and he was not getting better. His oxygen would not come up, and this was for weeks. And then he just contacted one of those doctors and he got on certain treatments. And within like literally a week, his oxygen was better and he was able to come back home. So I would make sure you're having the right care from the right type of doctor. If you're just in a hospital, chances are they're not going to treat the COVID the way it should be treated. Hi, Katie. You were given pharmaceutical drugs and they really threw off your infection and it made it worse. What do you suggest, cleanses or therapies to bring back your balance? So what I would do is I would watch my masterclass training, reach out to us, Katie, because I'm not sure what pharmaceutical drugs to use. That you should never ever treat by yourself with pharmaceutical drugs because you don't know if you even need it, what dose you should use that's safe. And if you take too much, you can hurt yourself. If you don't take enough, we never just start treating without doing a prep phase first, feeling a lot better first. But they can be really helpful when you're using them correctly. They're really, really helpful. Like, it's amazing what comes out. But again, they're not a magic cure and you can't just use them by themselves. And you have to know what you're doing. So my guess is that you probably took something that maybe aggravated the parasites you're dealing with and it wasn't an effective dose or effective treatment, and it just kind of, we call it angry worm syndrome, and that was settled down in about 3 days if you stop. Never ever push through a Herx reaction. If you're working with a practitioner, always stop, reach out to them. But just start to learn the process first, Katie. Like, just make sure that you watch my masterclass training. I've got tons of videos. Start to change your diet, start feeling better. If you need support, reach out to us. We've got a program that will help you, guide you through the whole process. Hi, all right. And then we have Rolando. You have multiple sclerosis for 10 years now, and you want to fight it off. You've seen my information and you follow my program, but never responded. So you've seen my information and so I don't think you've been one of my students yet. Your name is not familiar. So it's one thing to follow like I've got all the diet guidelines, the Live Disease-Free diet guidelines on our website, livediseasefree.com, under research. Start to change your diet, but you have to get the carbs low enough. If you're kind of like above 50 total grams of carbs or around 50, you may not notice as many symptom improvements as you get down to 30 total grams of carbs. So you can start with that, but you have to treat the parasites if you want to recover. That is the key. And that is a bit of a skill and a bit of an art. And I wish it was not that hard. In time, I'm hoping that we'll have more and more doctors that are willing to do this. That is my hope and my prayer. That's what I'm working towards. But you either wait for that to happen or else you take charge of your health and you join a program like the Live Disease-Free plan, and you work, and we show you how to access treatments and whatever you need for practitioners, etc., so that you will use the treatments safely and effectively. You've got to work with somebody and you need to find a practitioner. George, when do I start treating? It's really important that you're following the diet, your carbs are low enough, that you're noticing significant symptom improvements. So, for example, one student that just started following the Live Disease-Free diet on December the 26th. So she started on December 26th. So she's not perfectly, because she was just starting, right? And so she's starting making changes, but I think she was doing quite well because she had remarkable improvements. So by the 28th, she was taking something to help her bowel movements more regularly. By January the 4th, she was able to transfer herself out of her wheelchair onto the chairlift by herself, but she was also able to stand up by herself. So that's what this diet can do, is that when you decrease the carbs, which is the favorite food to bacteria, to protists, to worms, fungi, the inflammation starts to go down and people start to notice significant symptom improvements like what this student, and she's just so incredibly happy. And like that happened in just over a week's time. So that's what can happen, is that we find bladder function improves tremendously when the carbs are low enough. Then people are sleeping better. They have less brain fog. Their cognitive function is better. Their mood is better. They can notice that their spasms are starting to go down just with diet alone. And then we're supporting the body, daily bowel movements, sleeping. Then we can start treating. We can start doing these oxidizing enemas. And like we just had our call yesterday, and the worm pictures that people are passing are just crazy, and how they're feeling. They're like, this is so crazy. Like just before I release this worm, like I'm feeling really emotional, and I pass it, and then I just feel better than I felt in years. And so it's really crazy. And these are bigger worms that they're passing too, right? I should say they're not just like little tiny worms. So it's quite like it's been such a learning curve, learning journey with working with all these students, and just seeing, what's working, what isn't working, where they need to make changes, where sometimes they're not implementing well enough, just helping them to troubleshoot. It's so incredible. And it's a skill you'll have for the rest of your life, because you will, once you treat parasites, like I bought a horse, right? An older horse. She's 15 years old, older horse like me. But, and I have dogs too. And I know this, like you're supposed to deworm your pets every few months. And then we don't deworm ourselves. Like, does that make any sense? So our pets get parasites and they pass them on to us, but we deworm our animals, but we don't deworm ourselves. That doesn't even make any sense. So this is a skill that you need to learn to recover from chronic disease, but then also to make sure that you stay healthy for the rest of your life. All right, is MSA an MS disease as well? I'm not sure. I was saying ALS. I'm not sure which one you meant. You're very welcome. So when do we start treating? Once your carbs are low enough and you're feeling a lot better and you're having daily bowel movements and you're sleeping at least 8 hours per night, then you should start treating. Then you can start treating. If you just start treating without doing the prep work, you will not feel good while you're treating parasites. So it's, they're fed, they're really happy, and they will react and they'll make you feel miserable. So Rolando, make sure to check out my masterclass training. That is your winning formula. That tells you all the steps that you need to take to recover from MS. It's getting ready to treat and treat. You don't need a lot of supplements. You do not need a lot of testing. You just need to get ready to treat, and you need to treat the parasites as quickly as possible. So, Deborah, how do you fight it if you said, okay, I don't understand that. Hi, how do you fight it if you said it, but I just wonder where to start? I think I explained where to start. Diet, support the body, and then start treating. 3 to 6 weeks, you should be able to start treating. Tiffin, there we go. She just put in her success in there since December 26th. I didn't want to say your name, but thank you so much for sharing. I'm so proud of you. That's so amazing. And she's got it. And I talked a couple of weeks ago about your why and your intention. So the hot chocolate, she'll probably skip the run, but she's got a plan. She has got her intention and her why is very clear. And she's already just read her success in the feed of the comments here. You'll absolutely have a tear of joy in your, all right. And hi, Katie, you're very welcome. And Kim, it's 1:45 a.m. in Ireland, but you set your clock to tune in, you should be in bed, girl. You should not be up listening to this. Absolutely not. I'm going to let you go so that you can go to sleep. Very, very important that you are catching your sleep. You can always listen to replays, right? When you are in Europe, because 5 o'clock Pacific is in the middle of the night for Europe. So I just wanted to share all of this with you. And although it's frustrating that the research is still so painfully slow, a study like this, at least it's moving in the right direction, but still it's ridiculously slow. I'm really hoping that there's certain universities like the University of Calgary that they have been doing a lot of work on dysbiosis. I just wish I had more time, or maybe different researchers reaching out to me that we could collaborate together. I'm just really busy with all the students we're supporting and all the research that we're doing on our own. But if you're like, we've had different doctors and researchers reach out to us. We collaborate with anyone. We share everything that we're doing. We share all of the foundational work. We want this to go mainstream. We want our doctors to treat parasites early in their patients so they can avoid the pain and agony that we go through when we are diagnosed with a chronic disease. So if you are new to all of this and this is like giving you some hope, that is like, oh my gosh, I didn't think that infections and parasites could be causing what I'm dealing with, make sure to watch my videos on YouTube and on Facebook. On our website, Live Disease Free, we have something called a blog, and there are posts every week where I share my notes, and there's a shorter version of the videos. So you can scan things, you can go to different hyperlinks to references. Share that with other groups. Start talking about infections. Start changing your diet. Start feeling better. And if you need help in treating these parasites, make sure to watch my masterclass training. And it's not just if you need help, but if you want to know the steps that we take. I'm very open. I share all the steps of what we take to recover, and you can watch that. But please work with somebody when you are treating. Very, very important, because these drugs they have an LD50, they have a toxicity. You do not want to hurt yourself. You don't want the parasites to become resistant to these drugs. So make sure that you're working with someone. If you don't have a practitioner, reach out to us. We would love to support you. We've got different options that we can help you in full support or more home study support, whatever is best for you. So I hope you have a wonderful week. And if you enjoy everything that I share, you find it helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you next week. Take care and bye-bye for now.